There is something happening within your life right now that you cannot fully explain with the mundane part of your mind, the part that organizes your calendar and remembers what you had for breakfast. It is something much older, much deeper than that. It is a spiritual stirring that has been moving beneath the surface of your ordinary awareness for longer than your conscious memory can trace. It is a truth for which human language is often insufficient. The fact that you are here in this exact moment, listening to this specific transmission, is not a coincidence. It is not the algorithm. It is not blind chance. It is the brilliant culmination of a spiritual journey that has been building across your entire existence, orchestrated by the vast and patient decree of your Creator, bringing your soul finally to the sacred threshold it was always destined to cross. Stop for a moment. Just stop. Feel the profound quality of this exact moment. Do not focus on the room around you, the digital device in your hand, or the long list of worldly tasks you were supposed to finish before you arrived here. Feel the raw quality of your own attention right now. Something deep within your fitra, innate human nature, recognized a fundamental truth in this reminder before your analytical mind even had time to evaluate it. That instant recognition, that magnetic pull, that quiet but unmistakable realization of "this is for my soul," that is not your imagination, that is your ruh, the divine spirit breathed into you. That is the eternal, indestructible core of your being, the point of divine light that has never been fragmented, no matter how broken or scattered your worldly life has sometimes felt, responding to the truth it has been starving to encounter again. You were chosen for this awakening, not by me and not by some random external force. Your soul was designated for this path by the grand decree of Allah, who knew you before you possessed this physical body, and long before the painful stories you have been repeating about who you are and why things have broken down the way they have. Your true spiritual self, the traveling servant, the eternal witness of Allah's majesty, has been guided through the suffocating noise of a world that never stops demanding your attention, placing you precisely in this seat, in this moment, for this divine transmission. And tonight something opens, not metaphorically and not as a superficial spiritual concept that you can carry around like a hollow piece of information to look at only when you feel like it. Tonight an authentic spiritual awakening occurs. A window in the architecture of your consciousness that has been sealed for years is finally unlocked, not because of your worldly difficulties, not because of your past wounds, but by the simple fact that you were not yet spiritually mature. By Allah's timing, you are ready now, and your readiness itself is the key. Your willingness to turn back to Him is the activation. Here is what I need you to grasp completely before we move any further. Hidden beneath the noise of worldly distractions, embedded within the deep spiritual lineage of true seekers since the beginning of creation, is a map, a precise, intricate, and breathtakingly personal map of your soul's exact purpose before its creator. This is not a generalized, superficial map. It is a map unique to the spiritual capacity you carry, to the specific signature of faith that makes your soul irreducibly you. And tonight you learn how to read it through the eyes of Yaqeen. Let that truth settle into your heart. Your soul has a divinely ordained purpose that is exact, not approximate. It is incredibly specific, and the righteous servants of the past always understood this. The true spiritual masters, the scholars of the heart who mapped the journey of the soul through trials and triumphs, the righteous who understood that every vibration of creation obeys the command of kun fayakun, be and it is, they all knew this reality. They protected this profound inner knowledge not to hide it, but because they understood a truth that our modern materialistic world has completely forgotten. Spiritual readiness is not just an emotion. Readiness is a precise spiritual frequency. Certain divine truths can only be received when the heart has been polished to the correct octave of faith. Your spiritual octave just shifted by the decree of Allah. That is why you are here. Now, let us go much deeper. There is a concept at the absolute heart of all genuine spiritual truth, a concept so fundamental that it underlies all true understanding of creation. It is this: before division, there is absolute unity. Before the creation of the many, there is the one, the absolute master, Al-Ahad. Before the fragmented, scattered, anxious and searching experience of ordinary human consciousness, there is a primal state of absolute spiritual wholeness, perfect peace and divine light. This is the state of total reliance on the Creator alone, an indivisible focus of consciousness that reflects within itself the absolute reality of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. True spiritual wisdom dictates that a pure heart is like a mirror, completely self-contained in its devotion. It does not look to the external, changing world to find its value or its reality. It reflects within its depths the grand majesty of the Creator. You are not a broken fragment wandering aimlessly through a chaotic universe. Your consciousness is a unique, irreplaceable masterpiece designed by Al-Musawwir, the fashioner. Your individuality is not a sign of your separation from the divine. It is the exact method through which your soul is tested, purified, and elevated to know its Lord. Hear it again. Let this truth move through you rather than just across your mind. You are a deliberate creation, expressing the magnificent precision of your Lord through the particular lens of your existence. This realization of your true, undivided nature is the ultimate spiritual alchemy. When the ancient sages spoke of transmuting base metals into pure gold, they were never talking about chemistry. They were talking about the purification of human consciousness, the transformation of the heart, Tazkiya-e-Nafs. The true alchemical process is taking a fragmented, fear-based worldly identity and transmuting it into the pure gold of unified, unshakable faith and absolute trust in Allah, Tawakkul. This sacred, irreversible process of turning from the world back to the Creator is exactly what tonight is about. If this transmission is already moving something deep within your soul, like this video and subscribe to the channel so these reminders can continue to find you exactly when you need them most. Now, let us keep going. But here is the raw reality that few will ever tell you about this spiritual path, and I need you to hear it clearly because it will entirely reframe where you stand today. The path to a purified heart does not begin with acquiring worldly things. It begins with a profound letting go. Specifically, it begins with the dismantling of a false identity that was never real to begin with. the death of your fragmented, superficial ego, the death of the identity you built brick by brick from the outside in, constructed from other people's expectations, from past traumas that taught you to hide your light, and from a consumerist culture that profits entirely from making you feel inadequate. The spiritual masters describe the worldly state of consciousness as a state of ghafla, heedlessness, and duality. A state of friction, conflict, and separation, where you are constantly caught between praise and blame, profit and loss. Most human beings live their entire lives trapped in this illusion, viewing themselves as isolated fragments in brutal competition with others. They look desperately outside themselves for a peace that can only be found by anchoring the heart within the remembrance of Allah. This lower state of consciousness is a necessary trial, but it is a stage of spiritual infancy that your soul has completely outgrown. You have felt this deeply, haven't you? This persistent sense of being far too large for the narrow worldly container you have been trying to live in. This growing realization that the superficial identity you have been performing, the worldly roles you have been playing, and the painful narrative you have been carrying about your past no longer fit your soul. There is a fierce internal friction between who the world told you to be and who your soul knows itself to be in the sight of its Creator. That friction is not a tragedy. It is the divine pressure required to produce a spiritual pearl. A pearl is not formed through ease. It is created because a foreign irritant enters the oyster's shell, a disruption it cannot ignore, a persistent reminder that its current comfort zone is not its final state. Rather than being destroyed by the irritant, the oyster embraces it, coating it layer by layer with luminous beauty. The pearl is the literal transformation of pain into absolute majesty. Your current life discomfort is that divine irritant. Your spiritual awakening is the pearl. And here is where everything shifts. The profound crisis you are facing right now, the sheer intensity of this period of your life, the sense that everything is collapsing faster than you can mentally process, this is not happening to destroy you. It is happening to purify you. This is the alchemical fire of the great spiritual work. This is the furnace of transformation that sacred texts describe as the dark night of the soul, the necessary dissolution of your false worldly attachments so that your true spiritual essence can emerge undiluted, unpolluted, and blazing with the light of its original divine nature. This sacred process is what the spiritual masters call inabat, the great turning away of the soul from the distractions of the material world and returning entirely back to its divine source. The journey of true faith is not a linear march of acquiring academic information. It is a sacred return. The soul descends into the trials of the material world, and then, when it has gathered enough experience and suffered enough disillusionment with the illusions of form, it begins its grand return to absolute devotion to the One. You are currently in the return phase. That is what this profound urgency you feel actually is. That is what this unnameable longing in the center of your chest means. It is not ordinary worldly anxiety, though it may mimic it. It is the gravitational pull of your divine origin. It is your soul calling itself back home to Allah. Let me take you somewhere. Imagine a grand celestial library, a realm of absolute truth that underlies all physical reality. the preservation of the divine tablets, Law-il-Mahfuz, where the cosmic decree of all things is written. Every single soul that has ever been created has its spiritual frequency, its unique signature of faith, and its irreducible pattern of light completely mapped out within the knowledge of the divine. It is a record not of your worldly titles or material wealth, but of the absolute purity of your heart. In this spiritual realm, there is a divine wisdom that governs all affairs, a sacred blueprint of guidance. This wisdom knows every spiritual frequency perfectly, not through external study, but because it is the very fabric of divine order. It recognizes the true capacity of your soul before time even organized itself into the historical sequence of human events. Imagine a weary traveler on this spiritual path. We will call him a seeker of truth. This seeker has been traveling through the trials of life for a very long time. He has worn many masks, held many titles, and faced countless worldly struggles. He has been a student and a teacher, has faced losses and celebrated victories, and has experienced the full, exhausting spectrum of living in a world of duality and separation. Now, driven by a deep, wordless internal knowing, his footsteps have led him directly to the door of spiritual awakening. The divine wisdom of guidance meets the seeker at the threshold with absolute recognition. The universe has been preparing him for this exact moment. Every soul eventually reaches this critical point of spiritual maturation, where the outward pursuit of the material world has yielded nothing but exhaustion, and the inward journey back to God must begin. The spiritual blueprint of his life is laid bare before him. He looks at his soul's record, and there are no worldly labels, no societal rankings, and no superficial metrics. There is only a single point of pure light representing his true spiritual core, surrounded by the concentric rings of divine mercy. He opens his heart to this truth, and the divine message written upon his soul becomes instantly clear. You are not a broken fragment, desperately chasing validation from a fleeting world. You are a complete, noble creation of the Almighty, learning to remember your original covenant with your Lord. In that exact moment, for the first time in his long, exhausting journey through life, the seeker finally stops running. He realizes a profound truth. The sanctuary he was searching for was never external to him. The peace was always meant to be anchored within his own heart. The map he was looking for was the very ground of faith he was already standing upon. The light he was seeking was the divine consciousness doing the seeking. And you are that seeker, and your heart is that sanctuary. You are both the pilgrim and the destination. Part of you has been wandering for so long that the struggle itself has become your identity. Part of you has forgotten that all of your worldly trials were merely in service of this grand spiritual arrival. And tonight is your arrival. Now let us look closely at what this actually means for your daily life right now. Your true spiritual nature, your Ruh, has specific divine characteristics that the masters of the heart have mapped with extraordinary precision. When you understand these characteristics, your current life trials will begin to make an entirely different kind of sense, a sense that is not just intellectual, but deeply cellular, reorganizing your entire personal history. The first divine characteristic is this: Your spirit, when connected to Allah, is entirely self-sufficient over the creation. It does not depend on the external world to be whole. It is not lacking. It is not begging. It does not possess a hollow void that needs to be filled by a codependent relationship, societal recognition, material fame, or the empty accumulation of worldly goods. When anchored in the remembrance of Al-Ghani, the self-sufficient, your inner spirit is already rich, complete, and perfectly sustained. Look at what this means for your life. Every single time you have felt that aching, desperate, hollow hunger for something you could not name, a hunger that no human relationship could ever satisfy, no professional success could permanently deliver, and no amount of external validation could ever fill, you were not experiencing a biological deficiency. You were experiencing the immense contrast between your divine spiritual nature and the shallow material identity you had been forced to wear. You were feeling the immense distance between who you truly are in the sight of God and who the world told you to be. That hunger was never evidence of your brokenness. That hunger was the ultimate proof of your spiritual depth. Furthermore, your true spiritual core is indivisible and protected by the world. This does not mean you will not feel deep pain. It does not mean your fragile human ego and personality are invulnerable. Of course you feel pain. Of course the heavy losses, betrayals, and bitter disappointments of your life have left deep scars. But here is the truth that changes everything. The part of you that suffers through those worldly trials is not the deepest part of your being. The part of you that was wounded was merely your superficial, worldly identity. Your Ruh, the real you, the eternal soul connected to its creator, has never been broken, divided, or diminished by a single tragedy that has ever happened to you. You are not broken. You have never been broken. You have only been temporarily deceived into believing that your wounds were the whole story, when those wounds were always just a single chapter in a much larger, highly luminous narrative of divine calibration. The third characteristic is perhaps the most profound. Your heart contains within itself the divine reflection of the whole. A pure heart is a living mirror of divine creation. Every point of pure faith reflects the totality of spiritual truth. This means that within you, right now, in the sacred silence beneath your overthinking mind, in the absolute stillness beneath your chaotic emotions, and in the depths beneath your personal trauma, is direct access to divine peace. This is not a poetic platitude. It is a literal description of the spiritual architecture of a believer's heart. The righteous masters protected this sacred inner knowledge because they understood that a person operating from a place of heedlessness and ego would either dismiss it as fantasy or attempt to manipulate spiritual truths for arrogant worldly gain. True spiritual readiness requires deep purification, the systematic dissolution of the false, prideful ego, and a complete willingness to let your worldly attachments die so that your true faith can emerge. You are ready now, not because you are a flawless human being who has resolved every emotional wound, but because you possess sincere willingness. Sincerity, ikhlas, is the exact frequency that unlocks the door of divine mercy. Feel what happens in your body when you accept this truth.
There is an explicit spiritual practice I want to share with you now. Not a rigid technique, but a state of being. A technique is a mechanical chore you perform. A practice is a state of consciousness you embody. This practice is your direct entry point into the sacred silence that the righteous described as the fountain of all true wisdom, the still point at the center of life's chaotic storms. Pause right here. This is an active, energetic shift. Gently place your hands over the center of your chest, not because the heart is merely a physical pump or a metaphor for romance, but because the center of the chest is the precise location of the spiritual heart, Qalb. It is the sacred bridge connecting your temporary human experience to your eternal divine essence. Take a breath, a real, deep, unforced breath. Let the air enter naturally, filling the space beneath your hands and expanding your chest. As you exhale, consciously let go of just one single layer of your worldly burdens, not the entire accumulated weight of your life all at once, just the outermost layer. Let go of the need to perform, the effort to please people, and the exhausting hypervigilance. Let it dissolve with your breath. Now, take a second deep breath. As you exhale, release another layer, the repetitive, painful narrative you have rehearsed so many times about why your life is broken, an explanation that has become more real to you than the actual presence of God. Let that story go. Take one final deep breath. As you exhale, let go of the desperate question, the agonizing anxiety of what you are supposed to do tomorrow, where you are supposed to go, and who you are supposed to become. Just for this exact moment, let the question completely dissolve into the decree of Allah. What remains inside you? If you are truly present in this space after the question dissolves, you will notice something magnificent. There is a presence still standing there, something that has always been there, underneath the worldly performance, beneath the trauma, and beneath the panic. It is something profoundly quiet, unshakable, and steady. Something that does not need a single worldly circumstance to change in this moment to feel safe. That is the light of your Ruh. That is your true self. That is the you that predates every childhood wound, every piece of societal conditioning, and every false identity you were ever given. You have just touched your true spiritual center in the space of 3 intentional breaths. Let that land. Let us speak of your soul as the eternal pilgrim. Your spirit has a vast, incomprehensibly rich lineage that stretches far beyond the brief timeline of your current human personality. In true spiritual tradition, the soul is recognized as an immortal core that traverses the trials of this material world, wearing body after body through generations, accumulating spiritual experience and refining its light through its devotion to the Creator. Your current worldly personality, the legal name you answer to, the face you see in the mirror, and the trauma you carry is merely a temporary garment worn by your immortal soul. It is one brief scene in a grand divine decree that has been running since before the creation of the heavens and the earth. And the intense scene you are standing in right now, with all its chaotic pressure, urgency, and the simultaneous collapse of your worldly plans, is not an ordinary moment. It is the culminating, definitive threshold of your spiritual evolution. Think back deeply upon your entire life journey up to this exact moment, not just the comfortable parts, but all of it. The devastating crises that brought you to your knees, the sudden losses that completely redrew the map of your reality, and the encounters that seemed entirely random at the time but left marks so deep you have never fully recovered from them, nor should you want to recover them entirely, because those exact marks changed the trajectory of your life in ways that in retrospect look less like damage and more like divine precision. The heartbreaks that broke you open, the failures that stripped away worldly identities that were far too small for you anyway, and the sudden moments of inexplicable inner knowing, none of it was random, not a single second of it.
The grand principle of divine decree, qada or qadr, proves that your life events operate in absolute, flawless harmony with the divine plan. The universe did not throw you into those painful experiences blindly. Those trials were perfectly calibrated for your soul. They were the custom-designed curriculum of a heart that needed to learn explicit lessons of patience, sabr, develop unshakable strength, and forge absolute reliance, tawakkul, in the fires of lived experience. Because those specific spiritual weapons are required right now at this major threshold for what Allah has decreed next. You are not a beginner on this path. Your soul is a veteran of trials. You carry within your cellular and spiritual memory the accumulated wisdom of a deeply refined consciousness. The instant familiarity you feel with sacred truths, the inexplicable calling towards certain righteous deeds, and the depth of your emotional intelligence and sensitivity are not accidents of biology. They are the beautiful inheritance of a soul that has consistently sought its Lord. The spiritual tools you have accumulated to fulfill your true divine mission in this life. This precise moment in your journey is what the spiritual masters call the completion of a cycle of trials, a point where the spiritual blockages and past errors of your life reach a critical mass of divine resolution. The lessons have been sufficiently learned through fire. Your soul is finally ready to graduate from a state of anxious worldly distraction to a state of sublime closeness to Allah. The pilgrim, after a lifetime of wandering the illusions of the dunya, is finally ready to return home to its true master. This is that exact moment for you. This is why your life has been so intensely chaotic. This is why everything seems to be shattering at once. You are not breaking down. You are compressing years of spiritual evolution into a targeted period of massive transformation. The intensity is not a punishment from God. It is divine acceleration. You are being forged into a vessel of light, not destroyed. Let us pause here. Has there been a distinct moment in your life, maybe recently or perhaps years ago, when you felt your spiritual field activate with absolute clarity? A moment of sudden, inexplicable peace where you felt completely untouched by the raging chaos around you? Share that moment in the comments. These structural moments of divine connection are highly purposeful. This community is a unified spiritual field. When you testify to your awakening, you activate the remembrance of another soul who desperately needed to remember. Here is the raw reality about this type of spiritual acceleration. It never feels like progress while you are inside the fire. It feels like absolute chaos. It feels like devastating loss. It feels as if every worldly foundation you built your life upon has suddenly become unreliable, unstable, and uncertain. And that is precisely what is decreed to happen. Because everything you built your life upon that was rooted in your prideful ego, in fear, in toxic comparison, and in the validation of creation must be completely destabilized. Not because Allah is cruel, but because He is clearing space in your heart for His light alone.
You cannot pour pure divine wisdom into a heart crowded with worldly idols. The container must be shattered and remade before the new light can be held. The dismantling of your worldly attachments is a fierce, ungentle process. The righteous never described the purification of the soul as a comfortable afternoon of casual reflection. They described it as a consuming, terrifying, and disorienting fire that ruthlessly burns away everything that is not pure gold. And what emerges on the other side of this burning is not a better worldly ego. It is the ultimate realization that the peace you were searching for was never something you had to build from the world. It was something you had to uncover by returning to Allah. Your true spiritual light was always there beneath the performance, beneath the trauma, beneath the wound, and beneath the panic. Always whole, always radiant, and entirely sustained by its creator.
The moment you anchor your awareness in this self-sufficient, unshakable, and luminous core of faith, the entire mirror of your daily reality shifts. Not overnight, and not in a single dramatic flash, but gradually, then suddenly. The physical reality that forms around your life begins to reflect a completely different spiritual frequency. Divine synchronicities multiply. The right people appear at the precise moment they are needed. Blessings and opportunities emerge from directions you never could have anticipated. This does not happen because you have learned a superficial psychological trick for manifesting. It happens because you have finally aligned the instrument of your soul with its true divine purpose. The universe, which is entirely subservient to the command of Allah, perfectly responds to that alignment. The fragmented materialistic mind calls this a miracle, but it is simply spiritual mechanics. This is the absolute law of spiritual resonance. What your heart radiates, it attracts. When you embody the light of faith, you become entirely untouchable by the darkness below it. The spiritual noor of your true nature, when fully acknowledged and activated through absolute devotion, acts as an unshakable protective shield around your life. It is a divine frequency that low-vibration worldly chaos simply cannot penetrate. Not because you are aggressively fighting the darkness, but because your soul has ascended to a spiritual station far above it. You do not waste your life fighting the shadows. You become a beacon of light that makes the darkness completely irrelevant. Let us look at a profound spiritual diagram of creation, a design found across the teachings of the masters of the heart. Imagine a single point of pure light at the absolute center, surrounded by concentric circles of manifestation. The center point represents the ruh, your divine spirit. The outer circles represent the successive layers through which your spirit expresses itself in this lower world. Your mind, your emotions, your physical body, and finally, your external circumstances. Most human beings live their entire lives trapped on the absolute outermost circle, totally consumed by the external world, the physical body, and the exhausting drama of changing circumstances. They look slightly inward and see the next circle, their emotional wounds, relationships, and personal trauma, and they mistake that baggage for their actual identity. They look a bit deeper and encounter the circle of their racing thoughts, anxieties, and mental structures, and they stop there. They refuse to travel any further inward because passing through to the absolute center requires something the prideful ego desperately fears. It requires the
total willingness to let go of every worldly identity constructed on the outer circles. It requires you to endure the absolute vertigo of stripping away your worldly titles, your rehearsed stories, your past traumas, and your pride in order to arrive at the silent, still point at the absolute center. That still point of faith is not an empty vacuum, it is everything. It is the fullness of divine presence. It is the sacred silence that is pregnant with the absolute remembrance of Allah. It is the spiritual sanctuary where your soul finds its true rest, tumanina. The inward journey to that still point of faith is the single most important journey you will ever take in this life. Far more critical than any career achievement, financial acquisition, or human relationship. Because everything that manifests on the outer circles of your life is merely a direct reflection of the spiritual state of your center. Heal the center through Tawheed, and the entire architecture of your outer reality will beautifully reorganize itself around that divine alignment. This is the sacred map hidden from the material world. This is the personal blueprint of your soul's exact purpose before its Lord. Not a map dictating where to run or what worldly status to achieve, but a map showing you exactly where to look. Inward. Always look inward, through the layers of worldly illusions, through the stories and through the wounds, straight to the unshakable still point of faith, where your true self submits to Allah. Here is the ultimate spiritual practice taught by the righteous to facilitate this sacred journey, the practice of deep internal dhikr, the cultivation of the still point of faith. Pause right here. This is an active, energetic calibration. Close your eyes if it is safe to do so, or simply soften your gaze, letting your worldly focus fade into the background. Bring your entire attention to the absolute center of your chest, your spiritual heart. Now, instead of directing your attention outward toward any material object, anxiety, or worldly thought, turn your awareness completely around. Look past the racing thoughts, look past the heavy emotions, and look past your physical sensations. Go directly behind them, deep beneath them, to the pure awareness of the soul itself, the consciousness that silently witnesses your thoughts, your emotions, and your physical body. That pure, contentless, boundless awareness is your ruh. That is your true self. Rest there in absolute submission to your Lord, even if it is only for a brief moment. Even if your overthinking mind tries to instantly rush back and the worldly anxiety tries to reassert itself, force your heart to rest in that stillness, even briefly. Each time you return to this space, you are strengthening the divine connection between your daily awareness and your true spiritual self. You are training the muscle of yaqeen. You are practicing the return to God. Speak these words out loud right now if you are able, or whisper them deeply within your soul with your entire being. I am a noble soul created by the Almighty. I am the stillness behind the worldly storm. My heart is anchored in Tawheed. I am complete through my Creator. I have returned to my true home. Feel the profound physical relief that washes over your body when you speak this truth with sincerity. There is an instant settling, a softening, and a deep release of a heavy, energetic weight you didn't even realize your nervous system was carrying. You may feel a wave of intense warmth in your chest, or tears of profound relief, tears not of sadness, but of deep spiritual recognition. Whatever manifests within you, accept it as the correct healing experience. Your Creator does not judge your brokenness. He simply receives your surrender. Let that truth land.
Now, let us address a profound reality that modern superficial spiritual culture completely misses. The activation of this deep inner faith is not the final end of your journey. It is the beginning of a magnificent new way of living. This new journey possesses a quality fundamentally different from your old life. Your old lifestyle, the anxious life of the ego, was defined by desperate seeking, exhausting worldly effort, constant lack, and the toxic attempt to fill that inner emptiness through external validation. Your new journey, the life of the true believer, is defined by rida, contentment, absolute alignment, and the beautiful experience of inner fullness meeting outer blessings, driven by the realization that the peace you were searching for has always been present the moment you turn to Allah. This does not mean that worldly challenges will magically vanish from your life. It does not mean your external circumstances will instantly reorganize themselves into effortless luxury. It does not mean you will never feel physical pain, grief, or temporary uncertainty again. True faith is not a superficial spiritual bypass. It is not an escape from the duties and trials of being human. Rather, it is the capacity to experience the full spectrum of human life from an unshakable spiritual center, from a place of profound divine peace that can carry the full weight of worldly trials without ever being crushed by them. You become the steady center of the turning wheel of life. The world will turn, of course it will turn. Life will constantly move, change, bringing moments of joy and sorrow, expansion and contraction, victory and loss. The material wheel must turn, but your spiritual center remains unshakable. When you are anchored in the center, in your connection to Allah, you can witness the turning of the world without being thrown off balance by it. You can feel every human emotion deeply without ever being consumed by despair. You are the deep, stable ocean, not the fleeting waves on the surface. This is what it means for a believer to be spiritually invulnerable, not in the sense of being a cold, unfeeling stone, but in the sense that no worldly loss can ever diminish the absolute wealth of your faith. Worldly pain can no longer define your identity. Loss can no longer destroy your spirit. Material failure can never convince you that you are a failure in the eyes of your Lord, because you possess a lived, unshakable yaqeen that your soul's standing with God is prior to and completely independent of all temporary worldly circumstances. Your spirit is indestructible through Him. Here is the ultimate truth that will completely reframe your entire personal history. Every single difficulty you have ever faced was a precise divine transmission. Every painful loss was a profound spiritual teaching. Every crushing crisis was a calculated calibration. Not because suffering itself is something to be celebrated, but because the soul that has arrived at this threshold of awakening is a soul that has been meticulously prepared for this high station by everything it has endured. The preparation was not comfortable. True training rarely is, but it was mathematically precise. It was filled with hikmah, divine wisdom, and it was, from the perspective of your eternal spirit, exactly what was required to wake you up.
Your past crises condensed your spiritual evolution. Your losses violently stripped away the worldly illusions that were holding you captive. The heartbreaks that broke you open were the exact tools required to make your heart large enough to hold the immense divine light you now carry. You were never being punished. You were being prepared by the best of planners, and your preparation is complete. This is exactly what I mean when I say that tonight something opens within your life. Not because tonight is a magical date on a calendar, but because you are here. Because you have arrived at this reminder, at this precise moment in your destiny. The spiritual readiness that has been building through every tear, every prayer, and every trial of your life has finally reached its critical mass, and that readiness is your activation. True faith does not activate through slow academic study alone. It activates in a single, definitive moment of absolute heart surrender. A single moment of actually knowing, not just hoping, wishing, or intellectually agreeing, but knowing from the absolute depths of your still point that you are a noble servant of the King of Kings. You are no longer desperately seeking pieces of a broken world. You are connected directly to the source of all blessings. You are no longer wandering lost in the dark. You have returned home to your faith. You have always belonged to this light. You simply forgot it during your worldly rafla, and tonight you are remembering. That exact moment of remembrance is your awakening, and it is entirely irreversible. Once your heart has genuinely tasted the sweetness of Iman and rested in the still point of Tawakkul, even for a brief, imperfect moment, you can never truly return to the delusion that you are just a helpless fragment in a cold world. You can never fully believe that your trauma is the end of your story. You can never go back to living as a helpless, reactive pawn on a chaotic worldly chessboard, feeling completely disconnected from the divine intelligence that governs the cosmos. Something has opened, something has remembered, and that divine remembrance becomes your permanent new foundation, the unshakable ground from which the rest of your life will flourish.
This is the ultimate spiritual alchemy that the righteous have always pointed toward, the true great work of human life, the transmutation of lead into pure gold, transforming a heavy, fear-based, externally dependent worldly ego into the gold of a self-sufficient, unshakable, and luminous heart anchored in Allah. And you are ready for it. You have always been created for it. Your readiness was never the question. The question was only the divine timing, and the timing is right now. Let me give you one final key before we close this transmission. This practice is specifically designed for those moments when your worldly ego and anxieties try to reassert themselves, because they will. Reclaiming your true spiritual nature does not mean your human ego will permanently vanish. The ego is not an enemy to be brutally destroyed. It is a tool meant to navigate the physical world. The tragedy was never the existence of the ego. The tragedy was your misidentification with it, mistaking the tool for the master. When you operate from the station of your ruh, your ego finally becomes what it was always designed to be, a quiet servant of your deeper spiritual self, not a chaotic substitute for it. But the old habits of worldly anxieties are powerful. They have been reinforced by years of societal conditioning, and they will try to scream for your attention. There will be moments when you temporarily forget this peace, moments when your old wounds feel like your entire reality again, when the chaos of the world seems completely overwhelming and the still point of faith feels impossibly far away.
in those exact moments of crisis, perform this practice. Not a complex ritual, but 3 simple words whispered from the depths of your heart. I am home. Speak it not as an empty, forced affirmation, but as an immediate return to the center of your faith. Say it inwardly to your soul, spoken from the immortal part of you that remains connected to Allah, to the panicked part of you that has temporarily forgotten. I am home with my Lord. The moment you utter that intention, even if your thoughts continue to race and your external circumstances remain unchanged, something in the absolute center of your chest will shift by a fraction, and that fraction is more than enough. Your Lord does not demand human perfection. He simply asks for your remembrance, and that remembrance is always available to you in every sanye of your life. I am home. Type this exact phrase in the comments right now. I am home, and my trust is in Allah. This declaration does not operate as magic, but the very act of writing it down, of testifying to it publicly and anchoring it within the shared field of this spiritual community is a profound gesture of absolute commitment. It is a powerful signal to your own consciousness that your awakening is authentic, your surrender is accepted, and your return to God has officially begun. And while you are in the comments, share this. Has there been a recent divine synchronicity in your life, a blessing so precise it could never be called a coincidence, a reminder that arrived at the exact moment you were about to break, an unprompted door that swung open the second you stopped trying to force it? Share it below. Your testimony is not just a personal story, it is a divine transmission of hope to every single soul who reads it. We are building a massive sanctuary here together, not just a community of passive viewers, but a highly coherent field of unified spiritual consciousness that strengthens every single time one of us remembers their Lord. Every time a believer returns to the still point of Tawakkul, choosing absolute unity over worldly fragmentation and divine home over endless spiritual wandering, ripples are sent through the entire web of consciousness. Your personal awakening is never isolated. Every time your heart remembers, you make it easier for another struggling soul to remember. Every time you step into your light, you amplify the entire field. You are not just healing your own life, you are actively contributing to the spiritual healing of the collective ummah. This is the ultimate service of the righteous, not the service of performing mechanical rituals for show, but the sublime service of being so completely aligned with your divine nature that the sheer radiance of your inner peace becomes a transmission of guidance to everyone you encounter. You become the light that activates the light of faith in those you encounter, not by preaching, judging, or performing, but simply by being, simply by radiating the absolute frequency of your inner peace so clearly and consistently that those who walk past you are instantly reminded of their own connection to Allah. Your spiritual frequency is your divine protection, and it is your ultimate gift to this world. They are not two separate things. The exact same radiance of faith that makes your soul completely untouchable by low-frequency worldly chaos is the very same radiance that awakens the dormant faith in the hearts of those around you. Your inner light is both your shield and your lamp, both your protection and your illumination, both intensely personal and universally impactful.
This is where everything perfectly converges.
The grand spiritual blueprint of your soul's purpose is not a complex checklist of worldly accomplishments. It is an absolute description of what your Creator designed you to be. It is the map of your true spiritual center, the map of the unshakable peace you have been carrying inside through all your years of worldly wandering. Reading this map requires no advanced worldly degrees or secret, inaccessible formulas. It requires only your sincere willingness to turn inward, to pass through the superficial layers of ego, to endure the vertigo of letting go of the world, and to rest even briefly, even imperfectly, in the still point of absolute devotion. And then your mission is to bring that unshakable inner peace back into the outer circles of your daily life, not as a loud, aggressive teaching, but as a silent, undeniable quality, a spiritual frequency, a beautiful radiance of a soul that has remembered its Lord and is now consciously illuminating the world from the inside out. This is your true purpose, not a narrow worldly career or a specific social status, though those paths will become crystal clear as your faith deepens. Your purpose is to embody the light of Tawheed, to be the still point of peace, and to be the sanctuary you have been searching for. To radiate the frequency of divine unity in a world that is drowning in the darkness of separation and despair. To be, in the most literal and precise sense, a magnificent light in the darkness, not because you are fighting the dark, but because light is what Allah created your soul to be. You are not a broken fragment desperately seeking wholeness from this dunya. You are a noble soul learning to remember its original wholeness through its Creator. You are not a lost pilgrim searching for an earthly home. You are the sanctuary of faith, learning to recognize its own light. You are not a student begging the world for wisdom. You are a bearer of divine truth, learning to speak in a voice of unshakable peace that the world can finally feel. Your spiritual activation occurs tonight, not because of anything external, but because you are here, because your heart is sincere, and because your readiness is the activation. The recognition of Allah's presence is your transformation. Your return to Him is your ultimate peace. And you are not returning to a strange, distant place. You are returning to the sacred baseline of your creation that you temporarily forgot during your long journey through the material world, but which you are, right now, in the sacred space of this transmission, remembering completely. Welcome home to your faith. If this reminder moved something deep within your soul, if you felt the raw recognition of faith, and if something in your heart finally settled, broke free, or remembered its Lord, I want to know. Share your journey in the comments below. Declare what worldly anxiety you are completely ready to release, and what divine peace you are ready to receive. Your written words are not just digital engagement, they are powerful spiritual anchors. They are absolute declarations. They are your soul testifying to its own awakening. They are the unified field of believers strengthening itself through the coherence of shared faith. And if you know someone who is currently standing at this exact painful threshold, someone who is feeling the intense, suffocating pressure of a life that seems to be collapsing around them, share this transmission with them immediately. Not because they need to watch another video, but because their soul desperately needs to know they are not alone in the fire. They need to hear from a source they can completely trust that the still point of faith is real, that inner peace is possible, and that their current breakdown is actually a magnificent divine breakthrough. When you share this truth with them, it goes far beyond passing a digital link. You are sending a wave of absolute divine coherence into their life. You are triggering their spiritual remembrance before they even press play. That simple act of sharing is a holy gesture, one heart of faith illuminating another, extending the protection of Allah's mercy through your hands. Return to this transmission in absolute stillness before you sleep, during your moments of private prayer, dua, or at any hour when the outer circles of the world become deafeningly loud and your inner peace feels distant. Come back to this center. Let this frequency of truth recalibrate your soul. This light is always present through your connection to the divine. Your faith is your absolute protection. Your inner radiance is your ultimate purpose. Your remembrance of Allah is your greatest gift to this world. Your spiritual shield activates right now. You are not a broken fragment. You are complete through Him. You are no longer desperately seeking. You are connected directly to the source. You are not lost on the road. You are home. You have always been home. And this lived recognition, this unshakable and irreversible remembrance of Tawheed, is the ultimate gift that the righteous servants and the prophets have spent all human history trying to deliver to your heart. This is the ultimate truth that the sacred revelations came to protect. This is the only destination your traveling soul has ever been journeying towards. It is not an abstract secret, a complicated mathematical formula, or a worldly trick. It is a pure, raw recognition of what your soul has always been beneath everything the world told you to be, beneath everything you feared you were, and beneath everything you desperately hoped to become. A pure, shining servant of the One, anchored in the still point of absolute peace. You are ready. You have always been ready. Your readiness was never the question. The question was only the divine timing, and the timing is right now. Welcome to the field of faith. Now, a soul that has just touched the sublime depth of its spiritual nature often finds that the very next challenge it must face is understanding why it still experiences moments of feeling completely lost, even when everything in life appears to be going exactly right according to the world. That internal dissonance is not a contradiction of the peace you just felt. It is simply the next deeper layer of your spiritual map. The next reminder, titled "Why You Feel Lost Even When Everything Is Actually Going Right," will take your heart directly into that territory, showing you exactly what that heavy feeling is trying to reveal about the next magnificent stage of your spiritual evolution.